All right. Well, welcome to the People Strategy Forum podcast. We're a show that guides leaders on how to elevate the overall workforce. And we believe that people are at the heart of successful organizations. So team members' well-being, rewards, career development, they're all essential to a happy, healthy, and highly productive workforce. So this show discusses the practical and effective leadership strategies for top executives, senior professionals, and talent managers. So I'm glad to have everybody here today. So the first thing is we are going to be featuring Sumit Singla, one of our own panelists on the forum, to talk about creating career paths for your people. And so Shar Miller and Howard Nisewitz and myself are going to kind of play along with Sumit and throw some of those questions out there that I think that you're going to be mostly interested in. So Sumit is a highly acclaimed HR consultant on a global scale and has worked for a lot of organizations. In addition to CompTeam, he's been with Accenture and Deloitte and Aon and GE. So Sumit has just been a wonderful to work with. I mean, we've authored a book together, and it's been a real pleasure, just having him in the network and as a friend and colleague. So thank you, Sumit, for all of that. So first of all, Sumit, I would just love to dive in and let our listeners know just how you got into HR overall. I'm not sure if we ever covered that story.
Thanks for the intro, Sam. Yeah, so that's been an interesting journey, and it's been a bit of evolution over the last couple of decades now. Just saying that makes me feel old. But yeah, so it was partly design and partly by accident because I used to work as a stand-up trainer for a technical software. So I started off providing tech support to users of a particular software application, and then moved on to training people on that. Um, and that set off an interest in training and development, which kind of evolved into an interest in broader HR aspects. So knowing that people development goes beyond simply upskilling them or simply dragging them into a classroom and training them against their will. Um, so I went back to school for a couple of years, did my master's in HR, and for the last about decade and a half, I've been on various sides of the table as an HR consultant and also as an HR practitioner. So part of the internal talent strategy aspects of different organizations, and been fortunate to work in a variety of roles with a lot of great folks, many of whom are on this call as well. So really, really happy to be here. Can't hear you, Sam.
Oh, I'm sorry. So it's been a pleasure for us all as well too, Sumit. So I'm glad to have you on. So the topic of the day is career paths and creating career opportunities for individuals and focusing on how leadership can do this. So why is this an important initiative for companies to think about today?
Well, one, the research speaks for itself. So I don't remember the precise number, but I believe it's on the lines of approximately 70%. So more than 70% of people seem to believe that it's easier to find a role outside their current organization than it is to find a role inside. And which says a lot about why companies need to do more to retain that talent and open up different paths for them if the tried and tested or the traditional career ladder or career path is not available. Sorry, Sam, losing you again.
Sorry about that. So as we think about the differences between what is a career architecture or I guess it's the difference between career ladders in a career matrix. And so we've always had like career progression in the past, but how are companies thinking about this differently today?
I think earlier the premise was fairly simple that to get progression or to advance your career, whether you wanted it or not, the only way to grow was to get into a supervisory role and then manager, senior manager, eventually ending up somewhere at the so-called top of the hierarchy or the pyramid. Um, but of late, a lot of organizations that have subscribed to that philosophy earlier are changing because not everyone wants to get shoehorned into people management. And if you're some kind of a great subject matter expert, you're great at what you do, um, by promoting you to a manager, we lose a great SME, a subject matter expert, and we gain a fairly terrible manager. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation, and that's why people are now evolving away from it. Even traditional firms like McKinsey, they used to have the famous up or out model, where you either get promoted and you make partner in a certain number of years, or you're slowly asked to transition out of the organization. They've switched as well. So now, given the focus on alternate careers, given that not everyone wants the crazy pace that comes with vertical growth, they're offering branching careers across the organization. So not ladders anymore, more of the matrices that you spoke of.
One thing I think that all of us can relate to, including the listeners out there, is how the organizations that we've worked with in our career, how they handle uh, really helping their employees navigate through the different jobs, what's required, and so forth, and really advancing in their career. And so, if just turning it over to you, Howard, I mean, is when you think about, I mean, just I know that you've managed large teams in the past and so forth. Did you feel like you were supported in some of your positions as a manager and providing your people career guidance? Did that infrastructure exist?
No, I really can't say. I mean, there were certainly manager training programs, but I don't think there were enough resources made available in terms of really taking a more active role and an educational role in terms of, career architecture. It's been many years since I've been in a corporate role, but I think those resources were lacking, and I think it's only more of late that firms are focused on it. So I individually took that on as a responsibility, spending time with the people on my team, learning more about their interests, and actively encouraging them, to seek out opportunities and experiences outside my department.
What about you, Shar? I know as a CHRO of some large organizations, and what do managers typically ask of you? And so, have you heard some, wanting more support on career development or opportunities for their people? What are some of their concerns?
Yeah, well, at the time we were looking at career architecture, I don't even think we were talking about it as career architecture. And it was fascinating when I started working with Comp Team, I really started to understand the aspect of career mobility within the organization, like Sumit has stated, as well as realizing that career mobility was very important in the organization. And I reflect back at the time. So yes, as the HR business partner and many other titles I had, many times leaders were struggling with this matter, and I partnered with the compensation department. And unfortunately, it was more of a, reduction in pay discussions, or we need to let people go type of discussions, or budgetary problems. And I was constantly trying to promote that this can be a very positive process. Uh, please, as a leader, don't be worried that you're going to lose your superstar employee, because honestly, that employee is going to work even harder to achieve their career goals and mobility in the organization. And I think we were at the infancy stage of that. And so, yeah, leaders struggle with this all the time. And unfortunately, one of the things I saw that leaders would complain about is trying to do an experimental position, so to speak, or something new or innovative. But unfortunately, it wasn't quite best fit for the organization. And unfortunately, employees kind of got caught in that weight. Um, So it can be a negative unless you do it very organized professionally and use companies like Team to really assist you in the process. It can be quite complicated and time consuming for leaders, is what I've heard from them.
Yeah, no kidding. I remember the first time that I did career architecture in my professional career. I think it was for Barclays in, I don't know, maybe about 20 years ago or so. So and I remember that the process was quite difficult. I mean, it took us 2 years to go through the entire organization and structure jobs in an effective way and create career paths and so forth. And now there's tools out there that can get this done much faster and it's much more mainstream as far as doing this and ensuring that we can better attract, retain, and motivate our people by giving them career opportunities so they can continue to stay with the organization and move up in their and meet their career objectives. So so Sumit, in your experience, I mean, when we start putting together career architecture, what are the first steps that should be considered?
I think the first step is to be clear on what are your goals as an organization? How do you see yourself growing? Second is, what are the aspirations of your people? So it shouldn't be that you design some kind of an architecture and people can't relate to it, and therefore you create more unrest than already existed in the organization. So I'd say not really copying and pasting somebody else's career architecture, but creating your own by being clear on what are our goals, where do we want to go as an organization, and to get there, how can we provide great opportunities to our people? So what are some of the new roles that might open up? How can I enable people to move from their current role to, say, an adjacent role, which requires relatively less effort to skill for that, and is likely to contribute to good performance, high levels of motivation and engagement as well. And the person doesn't really have to start looking at the outside world thinking, I want to grow my career in this direction. I don't see any opportunity here. So let me just move on. So I think talking to people, figuring out what they want, and blending that into the organization's needs as well to create a fruitful partnership. That's where I think I'd begin.
I see the important part, of course, this is all about people. And then there's the important initiative of creating the infrastructure so this can all happen. And so I know that that's one of the areas I come in as a compensation professional and understanding positions. And so the first thing that, of course, that in creating that infrastructure is to think about jobs and what is required in providing maybe a forward 2 year advanced look on what the company may grow into, and so future opportunities. And then, of course, it's the matter of organizing your positions using job evaluation into functions and job families or sub-functions and levels as a way to ensure that you have the construct down. And then, of course, after that, then you have to think about what are the specific requirements in each role. And there's a lot of different new thinking that's coming out when we're talking about jobs. Sometimes it's not jobs anymore, but there's also the gig pieces or the positions, maybe multiple positions, multiple jobs coming together, or hybrid positions, or task elements that need to be considered. And so I think we are moving closer and closer as a workforce into gathering people's skills together and understanding what their skills are, and so and when we're putting together career architecture, because we've got to remember there's the company needs and then there's our people's needs, and we got to find the opportunity of those two together. So, but when what are the most common issues that you see with organizations not moving forward with career architecture? What stops them from putting this important infrastructure together?
I think just not being aware of the how. So it's easy to figure out that this is our growth roadmap. This is what our people want. How do you get from point A to point B, and how do you bring it all together? So not knowing who should get those opportunities to grow their careers in a different direction from the traditional one. Um, what are some of the criteria that we are going to use to help our people in developing? How do we give them that coaching? What do we even coach on? So that entire, I mean, the foundation, like you said, is the the job analysis and understanding through a job evaluation what is the relative worth of different jobs in the organization. Um, but to build on it, we need to know what are the different behavioral skills, what are the different technical skills required for each job, and what would be possible across the organization, what may not be possible. So how are we measuring our people? How are we giving them those roadmaps, and how are we measuring the success or failure of whether we're doing a good job there? I think that's where people tend to find it very complicated. But if you just weave it into your talent management strategy and you use good enough scientific tools, I don't think it's as complicated as it's made out to be.
And so for our listeners out there, I mean, I usually classify the technical competencies as knowledge, skills, and abilities overall. And then we have the behavioral competencies that are the soft skills that we often talk about. And so there are important aspects of each role. Would you agree with that, Shar?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think also the fact of competency. So I'll just throw out the big elephant that we're dealing with now is AI. So many jobs, there's a lot of fear about how AI is going to take over our roles. And we're looking to modify roles that can adopt AI that requires a different technical aspect and be able to only increase our productivity and in the utilization of that tool. It doesn't mean that it needs to take away positions. But with that comes the competencies and the skill set and the technical aspects. I mean, how many different softwares, I mean, even us, I mean, I know you guys are very technical, but I mean, how many different softwares, AI softwares, various things to create maybe a job description? And we're still in a huge learning curve. So being able to train and upscale our current employees and new employees coming in with, assuming people have those competencies, perhaps not, or core talent skills and abilities. But, with some on-site training or some Zooms or seminars, we can help our leaders achieve that and ultimately achieve the productivity and the return on investment in our staff, which should be one of our number one assets in organization.
I think, Sumit, you said it earlier in terms of people looking for opportunities outside the organization because they don't know what they need to do or even what's out there that's available to them. So, in terms of making the argument to senior management why they should care about career architecture, what would you tell them, that it's not just another HR exercise?
I think that's one of the easiest things to quantify in HR, Howard. Um, the cost of filling a position. Um, so in effect, filling in two positions. So you've got a vacant position that you're trying to hire for, and you've got a person who's currently staffing a position, but because they're not being considered for this one, they're willing to move out. So you're effectively incurring the cost of hiring two people, whereas moving one to the vacant position could be faster, could be more productive. You could end up, and I mean, it's fairly easy to model the financials of it. And there's also the intangible component, which you can't really model and put a number to. When other people see that these kinds of opportunities exist, they would be tempted to stay back and create them for themselves rather than trying their luck elsewhere. Because if you've got a good and I'll bring in the workforce element into this. If you've got a good workforce experience going, if you've got good culture, people would want to stay back. But if they see a career roadblock, that's when they'd want to move out. So
Right. And
found
I,
them hiring more HR advisors than less, and they were happier with their jobs. People were happier with the support they were getting from HR because HR wasn't just consumed by transactional queries being answered. So I think AI does have the potential to make our jobs better and to make us more impactful as well.
Well, if I could share one thing in my experience with this, I think I brought this up before in one of the health systems I worked with. I mentioned that we had over 4,000 job descriptions. And sadly, those job descriptions were decades old. So oftentimes I'd have a leader say, okay, we need a job description. So we go into this massive database and pop off a job description. Well, imagine what a 20-year-old job description does in an organization. It's problematic in many ways. One, when you're posting the position out on LinkedIn or wherever you're posting the job, Indeed, et cetera, um, employees are looking at it like, well, that doesn't fit me at all. I'm just graduated from college and, we are all about the new age of technology and this doesn't fit. So one, you're losing your candidate pool. And then secondly, when your employee's in place, I can't tell you the number of times I've had employees complain about, I'm not being paid fairly, equitably. I do 50% more than this job description says. And so then we'd find ourselves, HR included, HR business partners and et cetera, scrambling to figure out different terminology, something that's more clear and understandable. And so my recommendation is let's go back to the drawing board. I think one of the things we're going to bring up today is your business strategy. Maybe we need to go back to our business strategy and align, hate to say this, I don't want to make anyone cringe. Let's just trash our original job descriptions and perhaps rewrite them, which I know is going to be extremely complicated, and then realign our career architecture to the true needs of the business operations and the organizational needs. Now, I'm hearing from you guys, since you're the pros in this, is that now it's so much more quick and efficient and easy. So when the manager calls and says, I need a job description, we're not digging through old files and we're actually able to, within minutes, create something that's more comparable. So it's pretty impressive.
yeah, that's true. I mean, there's tools out there. I mean, and GradeR has the ability to create job descriptions based on their point factor methodology. There's other tools that are out there. PayFederate is putting together a job description tool, I believe. And just using ChatGPT in itself, you can create some pretty good job descriptions in a short period of time. So I think that there was a moment in our history where job descriptions were just too arduous to maintain, but now they're becoming something that's easily maintainable, and it can be part of that understanding a person's role, understanding the different career aspirations that a person can take in a company. So I think that's one advantage that AI has brought. Now, one thing when we were talking about AI, I just was talking to the CEO of CoBrainer this morning, Hans Burton, and he's going to be a guest of ours on the Rewards Mastermind podcast in next month. And he's using AI in his tool, but more importantly, what CoBrainer does, it's a company out of Germany. It identifies internal talent pools. And that is, in a sense, what we're trying to do here with career architecture is we're trying to retain our people. And the first piece is knowing what career opportunities exist in our organization. But then again, the next thing, and the harder nut to crack often, is understanding the talents, the skills, and competencies of our people that exist, because a lot of them have jobs that are not taking full advantage of all their skills, and so understanding our internal talent pool and the people that work within our organization is critical here. So Sumit, what tools do you know of that help us understand the competences of our people and ways that we can understand what the capabilities of what our employees can do?
I think one of my favorites, Sam, is of course a tool that we've all used, which is the TMA. And I think the free stuff that they provide in terms of identifying competencies and providing the entire library of competencies that goes a long way in driving that consistency across the organization. And then, of course, the assessment, which can be used for employee development and also to create those competency sets, which help us in figuring out what are the right competencies for each of those jobs or each of the areas of career architecture that we're trying to tackle. So I think that by far would be one of my favorite tools. And of course, like Shar said, and like you added on, AI or simply Chat GPT can also be useful in defining job descriptions, also making them more inclusive, as well as doing things like ADA compliance, etc. So we might miss out on certain legal aspects or certain compliance angles to what jobs should define, and therefore somebody with a disability may not even apply if they find the job is not compliant. And um, it it provides different kinds of opportunities if our uh, jobs are written in a better format and something that kind of appeals to or sells the role to people that we want should be applying to those roles, whether internally or externally.
Totally agree. So one of the things that in tracking in individual skill sets for our employees, there is having a system that collects all that information is rare. So I mean, I think there's more that are coming out, and there's some legacy tools. I mean, Workday has some capability there. Some career architecture tools that are going to be pulling that in. But I think that's the main thing. And as you mentioned, leveraging or getting to know our people so we can understand their skills and competence is important. And sometimes we can use assessments or tools like TMA to understand those pieces. Now, for those of our listeners out there that have never heard of TMA before, I encourage you to go to the competencylibrary.com, and you'll see a list of competencies there. Also, that they have they have apps that are available on the Apple App Store that are very useful, and also the TMA system is something that can be very helpful for an organization in managing their entire talent cycle. It's a system that we're familiar with here at CompTeam. So if anybody's ever interested in learning more about the TMA method and how to use those systems, I mean, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. Be happy to show you. All right.
May I put a shout out for the TMA here?
Sure. Yeah.
So I've been hearing recently that a lot of organizations, since some of those more mundane tasks and duplicative tasks that Sumit mentioned are now handled by technology. I've been hearing that, and I am saying hallelujah, because a lot of organizations are looking more for creativity in their candidates, and which is I'm artistic, I like that, right? So creativity, strategic, out of the box thinking, innovative, and aligning to the future. And so my company, we utilize the TMA extensively, and there is an aspect. So on that particular competency, creative competencies, what an opportunity to explore that and compare it with other team members to see how we can combine our team development, for example, around, creativity. And it could be anything, problem solving, analytical abilities, all of those aspects. My company utilized that, and I believe that's what helped my company thrive and do well during the pandemic. Actually, we were thriving during those years, believe it or not, and hiring. So the TMA was very helpful for us, and we definitely utilized the apps right at our phones, and all my managers are trained to utilize it from interviews and development and you know discussion aspects. So it's a really effective tool for us.
And that's a good call out, Shar. I mean, the most important thing that we need to consider as leaders is really our managers' ability to help their people navigate their careers. It's one thing to be able to put an infrastructure together and to gather information to enable the process, but we need to make sure that our managers are trained to have effective communications, because that seems to be the linchpin in all of this, is that if they cannot talk to their people, if they don't have the trust of their people to have those candid conversations and on career progression and compensation and all the things that come along with that, then it's simply not going to work out. So I think a manager training is critically important. So when you think of other aspects of mapping out career paths, is there any other concerns that companies should be thinking about, Sumit? What are the types of the different levels of career architecture that exist?
So taking up the first question, Sam, I think before designing a career architecture, there has to be a certain level of trust and faith in the organization. People should not be, I mean, fearful of applying for different roles. So there are organizations where you do have career architecture, but people live in mortal fear of their own managers on whether the manager will sanction a move away from the current function or not. And so and there can be consequences for trying to seek a move away from a manager um, where the career architecture simply falls flat. And I've seen this happen in some organizations I worked with recently. But coming to the second part of what you said, so what are the levels of career architecture? How do we get to the different forms of architecture? One, of course, is at a very, very high level, identifying what are the core competencies of the organization. So what is the core model? And you'd see a lot of organizations being known for different things. The moment you hear the word Apple, what comes to your mind is innovation. And so that can be core competency for Apple. The moment you hear McDonald's, apart from various health effects, which we won't discuss here, what comes to mind is operational efficiencies. You can go to pretty much any outlet across, maybe almost across the world. The taste of a Big Mac wouldn't really change. And so you can, I mean, they can pride themselves on their consistency and the fact that they deliver the same experience in the same format in different places. So that becomes their core competency. So is the highest level, or rather the starting point for architecture, where you can hire and you can train people to that level. And then, of course, we can dive down into functional structures where you identify what are the key competencies for each function. So if you're looking at, say, finance or sales or operations, what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities? What are the behavioral traits that you would require for somebody to be successful in sales or any of the functions that we spoke of? And then finally, there's the most detailed level would be the job specific architecture, where we map out the competencies required for each job. We also map out what are the proficiency levels, or what is the extent to which each competency needs to be displayed. So if you're talking about, say, communication as a competency, what is the proficiency required for somebody who's, let's say, a grant writer for um, a non-government or a non-profit kind of an organization, versus somebody who's, let's say, maybe at a similar level, but is, say, a kitchen manager at the same non-profit. So the proficiencies can still vary, and we can have job specific differentiation um, in those competencies. Those pretty much would be the three levels of career architecture.
Thanks, Sumit. And so when a company has career architecture that finally put together, they have their career paths mapped out for the organization, and they're helping their employees achieve their dreams. How often should that architecture be updated?
I would say it should depend on, one, the nature of industry. If you're in HR or tech, or if you're a tech SaaS kind of a company, you might need to refresh your career architecture a lot more frequently than, say, a mining or a geology kind of an organization, or maybe even a medical practice, probably. But I'd say 1 to 2 years is still a good time frame to relook at the career architecture. But overall, staying on top of industry trends and any kind of disruptions would let you know if there are any emerging roles, or if there are any roles that are dying out that you need to plan for.
Yeah, I often find that it can be a real heavy lift if we're looking at jobs all at one time. And so just like when we were looking a few years ago and keeping our job descriptions up to date, I'd often advise my clients that they should put it on a rotating schedule. So maybe you're looking at this function at this month, and next month you look at that function, and so forth. And so I think that we can take a lot of the administration and the heavy lifting out of maintenance if we just do a little bit every day. It's kind of like working out, right? And do a little bit every day,
Absolutely.
watch your diet, and everything stays in line. So
Well, and I think that it's really vital that the employee has full engagement in the process. Um, I I've suggested to leaders to literally have the job description at the table when we do our one-on-ones, and really go through uh, how is this job position aligned with your day-to-day tasks? Do you see anything missing or something that could be improved upon? Maybe some new trainings in development, even in healthcare. I mean, technology was coming out for, uh, you know, uh, phys- uh, empl- the patient record, for example, becoming electronic versus a bunch of paper files. A lot of our physicians were really struggling with the electronic health and information systems. And you can take an A plus 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 student like a physician and introduce a new technology and say, how is this impacting? One, does it align with what you're doing every day? And then two, do you have any suggested improvements? And a physician would really appreciate that because you're asking them their opinion. And so I think it's great to have the employee at the table when you're going through that transformation, and that'll help your process move it through the system on a daily or weekly basis.
absolutely. And matter of fact, this is all about them, right? Ensuring that they can develop. And that's another thing that I think we need to take away the stigma from personal development plans. I mean, it used to be associated with people that are having problems in their roles, but the real thing is that we should all have our own development plan that we're working towards, we're trying to fulfill, we're trying to stay on top of our game, right? So I think that's critical.
Well, also I'd say that I saw a mistake sometimes where I had one VP say, I want everybody to be 100% on an IDP or individual development plan. So HR would be trucking along, helping the leaders get their individual development plans. But then all of a sudden, somebody decided, oh, we need business acumen. Okay, we need this. So all that training and development was aligned to one opinion at the top of the organization. And employees felt, I have no buy-in in this. I'm not feeling engaged. I'm not feeling that you've really listened to the things that I would need to develop. Each of us know our opportunities and strengths, and each of us know our weaknesses. And every single one of us have weaknesses, but we don't feel safe to talk about that. We don't feel comfortable expressing, yeah, I really need to, challenge myself to learn this skill set. And then you'll find employees thriving because they're like, wow, I'm getting investment in me, and it's not an executive telling me what I need to develop.
Good points. So Sumit, as we come to a close here and we think about, career architecture and all we've talked about, what do we want our listeners to walk away with? What are the key points that you could say about career architecture that they should consider?
I think the first one is to consider working with us and bringing them up to speed. But what they really should look at is focusing on keeping the process human-centric, what's important to their people. How can they ensure that they're factoring in the ambitions of their folks into where they want to go as an organization, and whether so it's a bit of a fine balance. Are you measuring everything so hard that you only seem to be about the numbers, or do you have the right kind of measures which give you an insight into whether you're in the right direction or not? But the numbers themselves or the data itself doesn't become restrictive. So you get some direction, some sense out of it, but you finally balance the art and the science aspects to ensure it's a productive journey and it's not only checking off the boxes.
And it's not that scary. It does take some work.
Definitely not scary. Yeah.
It does take some work, but the benefits are huge, as you pointed out.
Yeah, I think it's important for all our listeners to know, and I mean, just leaders in general of companies. I mean, this is the real important thing of the future. Sumit and I and all of us here on the People Strategy Forum often talk about the workforce experience. And I know that Howard and I are longtime compensation practitioners. And the most important thing, of course, is to ensure that pay is right and these elements. I mean, we're talking about people's lives and how they're able to live and invest in their families for the future. But the next important thing is the employee experience, and which career architecture and developing their career is a huge part of that. It's critical to ensure that we retain people in our organizations. So overall, I just want to thank Sumit for bringing his wisdom today, and thank you all for listening in. So thank you so much, Sumit and Howard and Shar for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Till next time.
Yes. Next time. We'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.